We are live and online or something. I don't know. I never know how to open our podcasts.
Yeah. I think live and online or something probably handles it.
Should it? Okay. Well, I feel like
2024, Hapa.
It's the future's now.
The future has passed us by. How are you, Hapa?
I am fantastic. How are you?
How are you on this January the 4th of the year of our Lord 2024?
Can we just talk about the fact that it's 2024 real quick?
That one got away from me, the 2023.
Well, I joke all the time that, and I usually say it on New Year's. I've been saying it for the last 3 years now, 4 years. It's like 2020 has been the longest year ever. Like, literally.
Yeah, 2023, a lot happened for me in 2023. You know, I started a new job, but realistically, it started about 12 minutes into 2023.
Right.
When, we're cleaning up after all the festivities. It's like 12:15 a.m., and my wife kicks the dishwasher accidentally as she's walking through the kitchen and shatters her.
Brutally assaulted.
She did. The dishwasher never stood a chance. In fact, I don't think the dishwasher was actually even injured in the process, but shattered her ankle in 3 places, which, of course, the greatest part of that was my insurance had run out at midnight from the previous job that I was leaving. So, my 2024 has at least started off on a higher note than my 2023. But then you turn around, got a new job, did a whole new thing, and the year's gone. And another year's behind us, and we've all made another trip collectively around the sun.
Yeah. I mean,
as it turns out,
I the last couple of years, and we've talked about this to length, I think, so we don't necessarily need to sit on it too long. But I mean, the last couple of years have been a little rough, I think, for quite a few people. So I'm just
there's the saying, this timeline is the worst timeline.
Oh yeah.
Like at some point we've hopped timelines, and we're on the most bizarre possible timeline. I think that there might be that might hold some water. We are on a very bizarre timeline in 2023. Hate to see it going, but don't mind watching it walk away.
Is that where we are? Are we in the stage of our life where every year is just the worst year? Like every single year becomes the next worst year? Like,
I don't know. It's interesting. What was it? Is it Office Space where he's at the therapist and he's he's like, every day is the worst day of my life.
Yeah.
And the therapist is just like, that's messed up, man. Like when your therapist looks at you and is like, that's just messed up.
It's like, you're my therapist. You're not supposed to say that.
Dude, come on, man. It is January the 4th, 2024. This is our first podcast of the new year. And this is episode number 12. We're calling this episode Brandy Old Fashioned, which we're going to dig into that probably more deeply than anyone expects off the bat here in a second.
Yeah.
But we got some great stuff. We've been collecting subjects over the past couple of weeks, as the year wound down, and as we've said on the past few podcasts, it's kind of getting hard to collect subjects that aren't of a political nature or just flat downers. Obviously this day had its own set of news cycles that were pretty rough, and we're not going to be digging into too much of that simply because we use this as an escape from some of those things, but it's not out of insensitivity. For certain. Yeah. But we try to dig up things that are more fun to talk about, right? A little bit of escapism. So anyone who's tuning in on your favorite podcast channel, thanks for being there. We hope you enjoy. Just a heads up that we do record these live on YouTube. So if you would like to hang out with us on YouTube, you can do that with Real Talk with Hapa S3VYN. We do these live, and then we record them, master them, mix them and master them, put them back out. Usually they're out within 48 hours into whatever out into Podcastopia, right? Wherever you get your podcasts. So this is Real Talk with Hapa S3VYN. Uncle Joe Rogan stops by occasionally. I don't think he's playing. Yeah, I don't think he's coming by tonight, but I do have his mic ready.
I feel like
I've got his mic right here.
There you go.
Just in case, right?
You gotta come out here, and we need to go to the Comedy Mothership and and scream his name until he recognizes us.
Oh, yeah. I need to come out there. Anyway. We're supposed to come out there. What was it? September, October. I was supposed to come out there that time frame, so that ended up not happening. But maybe 2024 is the year, man. I come out there, you get out here. I should have.
I'm ready, man. I'll hop in the truck anytime. You just let me know.
You and Sam just gonna head east.
Throw in the truck. Well, if we head east, we're gonna get a little wet, so I'll go a little northerly. But yeah.
North and then east.
Yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It's almost exactly a northeast shot from Austin. That's why they call Southeast Texas, because if I just go east, I hit southeast part of Texas.
So in the south of East Texas, is that where that?
Ish.
So yeah, we've got some subjects tonight. I'm literally sitting here looking at Austin on a map because now
I knew you were gonna.
That's what I'm doing. How far east could you go? Yeah, you're gonna.
I can go all the way to Beaumont and then just go north. I mean.
Yeah. You could go. Well, how would you go? You go 77? What would you take off on 33? So. What would you go?
I'd have to look at a map off the top of my head. I don't remember. I know the general gist, but. I mean,
you could go through 2 Huntsvilles on your way. If you wanted to.
Seems a little odd to me, but okay.
If you're going to do an American tour of Huntsville.
I mean, that's a nice drive, honestly, from Austin to up where you're at, hitting Baton Rouge on the way. It's not a bad drive at all. So it's definitely something that we need to make happen at some point, I think. So.
I think we'll make it happen this year.
Let's talk about the title of the podcast, why we named it such.
So you named it. So what happened?
Yeah.
What's happening with Brandy Old Fashioned?
I don't even know how the conversation came up with my friend, but she's from Wisconsin, and she's like, "Did you know the Old Fashioned was actually invented in Wisconsin?" And I was like, "Pump! First of all, cheese capital of the world. Let's just." Pump your brakes just a smidge.
Did you know we invented snow?
Yeah. I was
and the exclamation point?
I was like, let's pump your brakes a little bit because I know for a fact the Old Fashioned was actually invented in Kentucky.
Was indeed invented in Kentucky, yes.
So let's just go, let's slow it down a little bit. And then I did some digging because I'm like, all right, well, she was one of my kids when I was in the Navy. So I was like, well, I can't have one of my kids showing me up. So maybe I'm wrong. I'll give benefit of the doubt. I'll do some digging.
Leave room to grow. Leave room to grow, right?
I'll do some digging, and it turns out that Wisconsin has a Brandy Old Fashioned that they tout as the only way to drink the Old Fashioned. And I would just like to say that as I was reading the ingredients, all I heard was diabetes. Because a regular Old Fashioned's already kind of sweet, but a Brandy Old Fashioned, that's a lot of sugar.
Yeah, so, depending on the whiskey that you choose, an Old Fashioned can be really sweet. I cannot imagine a Brandy.
Yeah,
Old Fashioned.
And Old Fashioned's supposed to be done with rye whiskey, but I do it with bourbon, so it's already a little sweeter.
Yeah, I generally use like a Woodford or something, which is a very smooth, sweet, middle of the road bourbon. But occasionally, you get a rye, and it's not as sweet. But yeah, I hear you. So Brandy Old Fashioned. And so what did you learn in your...
So I looked up the actual ingredients of the Old Fashioned, and I would just like to say it here and now for you, those of you out in YouTube and podcast land, that the ingredients of a Brandy Old Fashioned makes it something else. I don't know what it is. We can call it the Wisconsin. I don't know, but it's not an Old Fashioned.
Yeah, why don't you call it the cheese curdle or something, Wisconsin?
I'm just cheese curdle. Like, can I have 2 cheese curdles, please?
That just drink a couple of cheese curdles. Can I have a couple of glasses of cheese curdles, please?
Oh, God. That's not something that I really want to.
Why have you done this?
Oh my God! But the Brandy Old Fashioned is obviously you use brandy, so it's 2 ounces of brandy. You use brandied or maraschino cherries, which most bars are going to have maraschino cherries. They're not going to have like bourbon smoked cherries, which is what I tried to use, which Bourbon Barrel Foods, if you haven't gone to that website and looked up their stuff, if you want some really cool, amazing stuff, go check them out.
Can endorse.
I'm
Absolutely
telling you.
Can endorse.
I always use their smoked cherries for any of the old fashions, and it does add a little bit of flavor that I love. But then they talk about orange slices, which you don't use slices of orange in an old fashioned.
Yeah.
You use some of the rind, some of the peel, and it's as a garnish, really. And then 3 dashes of bitters, which is normal. But then they say finish it off or top it off with 7-Up Sprite or club soda, which to me makes it a completely different drink.
Yeah, I don't know what it is, but that's not an old-fashioned.
No. And I guess the Brandy Old Fashioned, allegedly, is Wisconsin's official drink.
Well, you had sent me this article, right? And there's 2 representatives that are looking to actually make this the official drink of Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And the way that the planets are aligning for a Brandy Old Fashioned to make its way into my life, I have to try it now. Not a big brandy fan, but I'm gonna have to try it.
Same. Yeah.
You know what, Wisconsin, I support you having a state drink. I don't support you calling it an old fashioned.
Right.
I've got to be honest.
They need
it's
to
something
call
else.
It something else, because I'll be honest.
An old
with you,
Wisconsin.
Because even the old fashioned here in Texas, like we said, it's usually with rye whiskey. I do it with bourbon, which does make it a little bit of different taste profile, but it's still true to the old fashioned. Like an old fashioned is typically a little bit of like a couple dashes of bitter, a couple ounces of bourbon or rye whiskey, and you garnish with an orange twist or orange peel, and that's it. Like a lot of times, there's not even a cherry included. I like to muddle it because I'm not a fan of taking straight sugar into the drink, but yeah. So
yeah, well, I love an old fashioned. I will absolutely judge a bar by its ability to make an old fashioned. Usually, when I go to a new bar, I will order an old fashioned first. I don't care what you make. You got all this fancy stuff on the menu. That's great.
Yeah.
Make me an old fashioned.
Yeah.
Like, have you got your fundamentals sound? But if I went to a bar and I said, give me an old fashioned, and it had brandy in it, I took a sip. I was like, was that brandy? I think I'm going to leave that bar.
Because that's now, really sweet, right? That's a lot of.
Oh, yeah, it's a
really
much sweeter drink. And it'd be bubbly, right? But if I said, give me an old Lambo, right? Give me an old Wisconsin. I can see coming. I'd love an old Wisconsin. I would love an old Tundra. Then I think I would be okay with that. But I don't. If I say old fashioned,
cheese curd.
Yeah, give me them old fried cheeses. If I said that, I would expect the brandy old fashioned. But when I say an old fashioned, I do have an expectation, as does the rest of the world, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the snow got to them.
I don't think I could side with Wisconsin on this. And I told Seven before, I was like, well, I don't have any brandy, so I can't make a brandy old fashioned, and I'm not really that upset about it. I'll be honest with you. I wasn't like, oh, I need to get brandy. I just went ahead and made myself a regular old fashioned. To Wisconsin, cheers to you, I guess.
Yeah, here you go. Cheers to you, Wisconsin. I'm going with Michter's small batch tonight. But, cheers to you, Wisconsin. I appreciate you trying to do the thing, but you know what? I'm going to be honest. The debate has been had. The jury has reached a verdict. That's not an old-fashioned Wisconsin.
Yep, hands down.
Sorry.
And I was like,
it's unanimous, in fact.
I was a bartender. I never look. You look up old-fashioned. The recipes are going to be rye whiskey or bourbon.
Yeah,
ain't nobody 100%. Talking about brandy.
Brandy ain't making the list. Brandy ain't nowhere on that list.
Nope.
So yeah. Well, I hope your friend feels much better. Now
educated,
with the knowledge,
in fact.
Yeah. Now they're empowered with knowledge to go back to Wisconsin, go back home and say, "Hey, whole state, you're wrong," and the rest of the world backs you in this, this adventure, this endeavor. Go to the state house, tell the 2 representatives, "You're wrong." Going to debate this on the floor.
Taxpayers' money right there.
It's kind of like buffalo wings, right? Like, name it something that's you. You've got an opportunity now.
That's a true, that makes sense, right?
Yeah. It came from Buffalo, right? Name it something that's like the old Wisconsin. Then make it you, right? I mean, Alabama ain't got none. We do Alabama white sauce, and ain't nobody even heard of that.
What is that?
It's barbecue sauce. the one thing that we uniquely brought to the world. It's a white sauce. You come out here, I'll get you some smoked chicken with some white sauce on it. Change your life.
Why is it white sauce?
It's white.
Is it made with like ranch? It's very well.
No, it's made with. It's usually pretty vinegary, made with some spices, mayo, and vinegar.
Okay.
Different types of vinegar. It's actually. So people do try to eat it on pork because in Alabama generally when people talk about barbecue they talk about pork.
Yeah, man. I'm
so
all
it's more
about
that Carolina, Memphis. That's
yeah,
where the influence comes from. Very rarely are they talking about beef, or brisket. So, but some people do put it on pork. I would never recommend that. In fact, if I saw someone doing that, I would try to stop them, threaten them with a Brandy Old Fashioned potentially. And I would say though on the smoked chicken, the white sauce is definitely on point.
Well,
and you come out,
some.
yeah, you come out. I've got the spot. I got the spot.
Let's go.
I got you.
I'm down.
I am
down.
But that's what I'm saying. If you're gonna have a food, just name it after yourself. I think that's cool, and then it becomes popular and it becomes part of your culture.
Like, why wouldn't you call it Old Madison or something, or the
Oh my
Madison
God.
Or...
Oh my God, that'd be amazing. Give me a Madison.
Right? Yeah.
That's
Makes
fantastic. Sense. Right? That's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah.
And I might order that just because that sounds cool. I see it on a menu. I don't know what it is.
Still, I'd be like,
Oh,
Brandy.
look at that. What a Madison. I'd like to have a sugar overdose. Give me that.
Yeah. Diabetes.
Mm-hmm.
Does it come with a shot of insulin first? Like
No, it comes with a life insurance policy. Okay, so we're gonna talk. Here's our subjects for tonight. Got my notes.
Hey, look at you, all organized in craziness.
I know. It gives me a chance to use my pens, but
which is the actual goal of the podcast, by the way, folks. Specifically,
it's just for me to write.
Just the pens.
See, people,
yeah.
I don't know that people know, man. Like, I'm a fountain pen guy, right? And these are all fountain pens.
You got a collection, man.
I do. And yeah, it was a COVID hobby that I fell into.
Ah, very well.
And started collecting them and got really addicted to writing with these things. I don't know if you can see this, but look at the nib. Let's see if the camera will focus on this.
Come on. It didn't do it. There you go.
There you go.
Not bad.
Yeah, 18 karat gold nib, like
day.
gorgeous pen. So yeah, we got some subjects tonight, and they're not fountain pens. Maybe one day I'll get my fountain pens in there. But we're gonna talk about exploding toilets in Florida, which I think is a great story. A great story for me to talk about, not a great story to have occurred.
Especially if you were the one that occurred too.
Yeah, I can't imagine being the occurree.
Wouldn't want that.
We're gonna talk about the largest solar flare since 2017 that hits in December.
Well, we'll get to that. Never mind.
We're gonna talk about Blue Origin, Jeff Bezos's company of going to almost space. And nearly space, his nearly space exploration company.
Yeah, right.
But we're going to talk about whether we think and our opinions on privatization and space exploration. I think that's something we've danced around here and there. We've talked about it, but we're actually going to jump into that a little bit. And then we're going to talk about obviously what Hapa's watching, what I've been listening to, and then what we've been playing. And then we'll finish up as we always do with Hapa's rules for good living. Is it rules for living or good living? What is your title on that?
It's just Hapa's rules.
Just Hapa's rules. That's all I wrote down. Why do I add anything to it? That doesn't need a flourish.
Hapa's rules for life, I think, at one point.
Rules for life? Okay. Hapa's rules. So yeah, I'm pretty excited. The goal, if you're tuning in, is we'll do these every 2 weeks. What I will tell you is, good luck. But we will try.
You're supposed to set achievable goals with the idea that you're going to attempt to achieve said goals. It
100%.
doesn't necessarily mean you
right.
will achieve said
That's
goals.
right. And so our goal is every 2 weeks. We generally do them on Tuesday. If we miss Tuesday, we do them on Thursday. In this case, we are doing this on Thursday. But it'll be basically 2 weeks on the next Tuesday that follows. I will be out of pocket completely next week, so this actually works out pretty well. We get to hang out. So, Hapa. Exploding toilets.
You found this topic. I'm not going to lie. I didn't read it, so this is all you. Because it makes me nervous talking about exploding toilets. Like, I think I realized the phobia that I have is
exploding toilets?
Exploding toilets. There's two things that I have. I realize I actually have a phobia of is obviously now exploding toilets. And
Absolutely.
and stuff climbing out of toilets.
Oh.
Yeah, because I had friends that
why
lived
you do that to me?
in the country in Southeast Texas, and they would routinely have snakes and stuff that came out of the toilet.
Lord.
So,
Lord.
That's not.
Well, so what I'm going to do, since you didn't read the article, I am going to read it word for word. I don't have a better way to do this. All right. So this article was posted by the AP on January the 4th, 2024. For anyone keeping score, that is today. Okay. So today, Orlando, Florida, from the AP Wire, a customer has filed a negligence lawsuit against Dunkin', claiming he was injured by an exploding toilet at one of the coffee chain's locations in Central Florida. Paul Kerouac is seeking more than $100,000 in a lawsuit filed Wednesday in state court in Orlando, claiming he suffered quote-unquote severe and long-term injuries following the explosion of a toilet in the men's room of a Dunkin' location in Winter Park, Florida, a year ago.
Oh my gosh, that's so
After the explosion left Kerouac covered in human feces, urine, and debris, he walked out of the men's room seeking help from workers and the store's manager, according to the lawsuit. An employee told him that they were aware of the quote-unquote problem with the toilet since there had been previous incidents, the lawsuit says.
What the hell?
Without diving into further details about the explosion. When contacted Thursday by email for more details on Kerouac's injuries, his attorney, Scott Spradley, said he was tied up and couldn't answer the questions until the following day. The Canton, Massachusetts-based company did not immediately respond to an email seeking comments. The lawsuit says Kerouac suffered quote-unquote bodily injury, and he has required mental health care and counseling since the incident in January of 2022.
They were aware of other incidences.
Dude.
How many people came out of the bathroom covered in feces and urine?
Many people need to before you put a little tape on the door and say, don't.
Just don't.
Don't.
Sorry, just don't.
Just a sign that says no.
I just love that line. They were aware of other instances. Like, like, what? Why?
Yeah.
How?
Yeah,
There's so many questions.
So Kerouac, right, walks in the
Poor
bathroom
guy.
at a Dunkin', which, look, you're risky business. Let's be honest. You go in the bathroom at a Dunkin', you are there on purpose.
For
like
sure. You're for sure.
you have said, I have no other options in life. This is where I am now. You go in the bathroom at Dunkin', and you come out covered in. And that was very clear. The article was clear. Human feces, urine, and debris. Like, it was clear. It was like there was other stuff in there. What the hell else was in there? What is going on? What is going on with this Dunkin'? It's almost worth a road trip.
Let's say that you're sitting there enjoying an apple fritter, and a dude, you just hear it. First of all, that you had to have heard it, right? You had to have heard it go down, and you're curious, but you don't want to be curious. And then old boy comes out covered in everything.
It looks like
I need help. Somebody help.
People are just like, ah, right, running
Yeah,
out
I
of the
think
Dunkin'.
I'd be like, well, I'm done eating, and get up and leave, right? Like,
what's with that latte? I just running.
Guess I'm skipping breakfast today.
The coffee is sentient. Just takes off running. What's happening?
First of all, can we just talk about how he didn't ask for enough? Like 100,000 is nothing.
Okay. This is actually part of what I wanted to talk about. See, there was a whole case back a million years ago, right? McDonald's, woman got burned by coffee, sues McDonald's. People bag on the woman because she got burned by the coffee and won the case. And what was interesting about that case is McDonald's intentionally made the coffee too hot.
It was actually not safe how hot
it was a practice to make it too hot because it tasted so bad that if they made it hot enough, they would burn your taste buds and you would notice it was crappy coffee. Okay, so she wins this case. So there are times where lawsuits that seem frivolous, right, are big corporate, bad actors.
Sure.
In this case, it happened a year ago. Dude didn't bring the case until now, and he only asked for $100,000. Like, if I'm going to shake down Dunkin', and I'm going to say, you have mentally caused me issues.
I wonder why it took a year. I wonder why. Like, was it
the cleaning regiment?
He like blocked it out, and then he drove by a Dunkin' one day and like had flashes of the event. And, yeah,
like an 80s montage of just
and had to go to the hospital for
exploding toilets.
Oh my god!
I mean, I've seen some pretty rough.
Look, man, if I'm getting covered in feces, urine, and debris, I'm taking Dunkin' down. I'm just saying. Like,
well, here in the States, right? Because in Japan, that's just a game show.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's a normal Friday night. I mean, that's,
Yeah, that's just how we do it there. I mean, there's like 46 people on listening to this podcast and all over the world right now in different places
Legit?
who are like, I manage a diner and we deal with that 3 times a week.
Yeah, that's literally Thursday night. I don't know why you guys are so crazy about it.
Every Waffle House in the Southeast United States was like, what's he bitching about?
Like, really? I don't understand.
What?
I deal with that every day. What?
Of course there was an exploding toilet in Central Florida. They all explode at some point.
The reason I ask is because I'm like, so obviously you were beyond being covered with the stuff, you could shower off, but surely, like, what if you got hepatitis or whatever?
No,
right?
there's it's I'm gonna laugh because it's a hilarious story. Florida man exploding toilet, Dunkin', the whole thing's funny on the surface of it, but I do feel bad for the guy. Like, that's not a good thing. Not a good thing to be covered in human feces. It's a bad and debris. That's a bad thing. Urine's okay.
I like how we have to continue to add the and debris.
And the narrator and debris.
And debris.
So it was.
Well, that didn't go as well as Bo and
That didn't turn out the way the Duke boys thought at all. Now did it?
Seven Deacon and I and a few others were just talking about how we need to start getting the voiceover of the announcer for our streams on Twitch, because that would be hilarious. Anyway, sorry, I diverted the conversation there. But
we're doing that at some point. We are doing that at some point. But yeah, so this guy, he's suing for $100,000. He's suing Dunkin', very large corporation. We'll see how it goes. I don't know that I'll get an update to that, but I'm going to keep an eye out, see if I can.
That's so
find
crazy,
out
though. It really that is. Just help me.
Help.
You have like toilet paper and stuff like hanging off of them. And...
Dude, I cannot imagine what. Okay, so I've worked in jobs where I have cleaned public toilets.
Sure.
I worked in fast food. I've cleaned public toilets. I've been in many public toilets in my life. I have been in some toilets and wondered, how the hell did you get that up there?
Yeah.
Right? Like, what did you do?
Yeah.
And now I know. The toilets explode.
They literally explode. Literally explode.
Yeah. Now toilet exploding is like a new, like you said, a new phobia I didn't know I had until today.
To the listeners out there, be forewarned. It's not the feces or urine you have to look out for. It's the debris.
It's the debris. Yeah. So our listeners in Jamaica who love us, we're still waiting on you all to invite us down.
Really upset we haven't
we've not gotten we still get the listens, right? Like, we still get all the international, a lot of international listens.
Yeah, I literally just pulled it up and they're still there.
Well,
we have 8 listeners in Japan too. I would love to go visit, just saying.
Oh, well, Japan game shows, I've been talking about you. Much respect. The one that I liked, the one that I was actually referring to in my mind was actually on a Japanese game show where they had a porta potty on a beach. And the porta potty's on the beach, and there's a cable attached to the bottom of the porta potty, dragged through the sand to a boat out in the ocean. Someone goes in the porta potty, they lock the door, and they start pulling the porta potty, which is on skis.
You're going for a ride.
And you're on the ocean. Eventually they hit a lever, and the entire porta potty falls away, and it's just a guy on a toilet with pants around his ankles going, ah! I'm like, that is not. How is it this okay?
My people don't ever change.
Yep. So Japanese game shows. Hapa's your guy. If you want him to participate, I'll narrate. That's fine.
I don't think I would ever be sold enough to participate. I don't believe. I don't think that's a.
It's not your thing. Not in your future.
Nope. Not my future. Maybe if you paid me, I suppose. Maybe I'll think about it.
Yeah, everybody's got a price.
I'm just saying.
So I would say, maybe as a word of warning to anyone using a public toilet, flush it before you use it. See what happens.
See if you hear like a timer start going off.
You flush it. Looks like it flushed okay. Go ahead and use it. That's actually I'll be honest. That's a recommendation my dad gave me when I was a kid. Was go in a public toilet, flush it first. Worst
seems
case
like sound
scenario.
advice.
Yeah, worst case scenario, you've done something and you trying to flush it and it ain't happening or is going the other way.
Yeah,
It's like that actually happens in toilets because it does. Exploding seems like a bit
leap. Extreme. Slight.
But backing up is a thing. Yeah, so there's a story a buddy of mine tells. He and his kid were at a public toilet at University of Alabama football game. If you've never been to those public restrooms, or at least they were back when this story occurred, not a really clean place. And at the urinal, his kid's at the urinal, kid's like 5 years old, trying to use a urinal in a public toilet, ball game, halftime, all the things that go along with that. And there's a urinal cake. Now, if you've never been in a men's restroom, you don't know what a urinal cake is. So urinals are things on the wall that you pee into, standing. And many places put what's called a urinal cake, which is this little soap-like thing that's in the bottom of the urinal that activates a nice scent to keep things smelling nice, but also cleans the bottom of the urinal. Well, the kid doesn't sanitize it, right? The kid doesn't know what that is. Reaches down and grabs it.
Oh, no. No.
Grabs the urinal cake. Of course, dad's like, no.
Yeah,
as the
too
kid's
late.
grabbing
Hands
it,
already
like,
in there.
no.
Yep.
So the kid picks it up. He slaps the kid hand.
Oh, my God.
Urinal cake comes out. Kid looks up. What's wrong, Daddy? I'll just wash my hands. And he said, you will never be clean again.
Yeah.
That's what he said to his kid. I met the kid when the kid was 15. Still had the phobia.
That was very traumatizing.
Yeah. So I imagine toilet exploding would lead me to a life of.
Yeah, and that's why I was like, it's weird
mistrust.
that he only asked for $100,000 because I feel like that should have been.
You got to shoot for the
quite
stars on that one.
significant, right?
Yeah, shoot for the stars.
Duncan ain't a small freaking company. Just saying.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so let's put a bow on that one.
Yeah.
Flush the toilet, kids, before you use it.
Jesus.
Make sure it's working.
Good advice. I'll add that to my list of
Solid.
goals.
Flush the public.
Always
says,
flush
the
first.
public toilets before you use it. That's a good one. That's a good one. You got that one from me. That's good advice. So,
It's just, from every walk of life, you can't really help it.
So, Hapa, the rest of our subjects are of a nature. You and I were talking about this today. They're about space and space exploration. We talk about this quite a bit, and I would say these subjects are both because we very much enjoy them, we keep an eye out for them, but also because finding things to talk about that aren't depressing or political or whatever is very hard. So we will probably continue to talk about space travel and exploration and these things quite a bit. But tonight, the rest of the podcast is actually going to be around that subject. So it's kind of exciting. We had talked about dedicating, instead of doing very diverse 5 subjects, let's do one kind of focused subject about a thing and
a theme, if you will.
Yeah, a theme, right? And we thought that was kind of a cool idea. And you were like, hey, look, kind of looks like tonight we're doing it. So here we are. So we're going to be talking about space travel. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about, the first thing is this enormous solar flare that NASA recorded on December. It was, what was it? December the 7th, right? It was a huge solar flare. So I think this was your article. So give me the skinny.
Well, so first of all, this solar flare was recognized. It had ejected. I'm trying to find the actual date that they first saw it, because it hit the Earth at the beginning of December, but they first saw it. It doesn't say when they first recognized it. I apologize. I didn't write that down. But yeah, so
you need fountain pens, Hapa. I'm telling you.
Evidently.
Let me get you a nice fountain pen.
But it was actually, it should be noted, this was the largest solar radio ejection from the sun that's ever been recorded before. And I do remember at the beginning of December reading this and kind of rolling my eyes because, and I don't know if that's a matter of me getting tired of reading, because everything on the news and everything on social media is like the largest, the worst, the hardest.
Oh, yeah.
We're all gonna die. End of the world.
Unprecedented.
Yeah. So I kind of let that go immediately, but I read a few articles talking about this specific incident was one of the largest It wasn't
Yeah,
one of.
yeah.
It was the largest radio solar ejection from the sun that they'd ever seen, and it was gonna. What I find interesting is we didn't see anything about it in terms of, hey, you you may lose cell service, you may lose whatever anywhere. I really didn't see any of it, and I
didn't either. Yep.
I remember years back when we've had them. I remember actually seeing that on the news. So I don't know why this one wasn't talked about, but it was actually the largest one, and there were actual pilots reporting communication disruptions when they were doing their flights. The weather satellites were having issues getting actual data back to the Earth. There was interruptions in cell service. There was interruptions with TV broadcasts, or just on and on and on and on and on, because this was the largest solar ejection in history, or recorded history. I shouldn't probably say history, because I'm sure it's they've had worse before, but they knew it was coming. They did know it was coming. There was multiple satellites. We've actually got 2 different satellites aimed at the sun that measure constantly the ejections off of the sun, and they knew that it was coming. But like I said, I thought it was kind of weird. This one definitely fell under I call it the nerddar, because all the science websites, news websites, and everything, nobody talked about it. Like, this was the one article, and that's it. And it really is just 3 paragraphs, and that's it.
No, it was
crazy.
And we tend to choose AP articles for those, and saying we'll add links to those if anyone wants them. But the interesting thing is, I do recall many times, and again, maybe it is nerddar, right? Maybe we do look at it because we're nerds and we like that stuff. But for years I've heard about these, and I did not hear about this one until
at all
now, and there were disruption. I was reading the article. There were pilots on airlines talking about disruptions, and there may be further disruptions from it, right? Because the radio gets here first, but they're monitoring that specific spot on the sun. And I was reading, it said that the sun is nearing the peak of its 11-year solar cycle.
Yep.
And that the actual maximum sunspot activity is predicted for 2025. So they think there's going to be a lot more of this. And I will say that we've probably gotten pretty good at shielding our critical systems, when you're talking about power grids and things like that. But I promise you, we haven't got good at shielding things like cell phones in your pocket, cars, right? There's absolute disruption to be had. So yeah, I thought it was a pretty interesting thing. We didn't hear much about it. So
yeah,
it's a pretty cool story.
That really kind of took me back, because they went into pretty good detail about what you should expect, what you would see, the northern lights being stronger than normal, and radio frequencies being et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But again, this was just not important.
I know in Alabama and Texas, we're really worried about the northern lights being stronger.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, it's...
If I see the northern lights in Alabama, we got a lot of problems.
That's what I was about to say. If we start seeing them, I think we got bigger things that we need to be worried about than
oh yeah. If I see the northern lights, and you're further south than me, not by much though. I looked at a map earlier because my buddy of mine said something about where Austin was, and it's almost. I mean, it's you're not that much further south than me. You're So
I just got to open around the Gulf. Really, is the problem.
Yeah. Well, Louisiana becomes a problem, right?
Right. Yeah.
The Delta. So yeah, it was an interesting article. There's a ton of information out there for anyone who does want to go check it out. There's a lot of activity going on with the sun. A lot of people do watch it, and if you search for it, you can find it. But you're not going to find it in the mainstream AP News, CNN, Fox News, whatever it is you get your sources from. You're not going to see it there. And this is actually part of what we're dealing with is digging through those sources for stories, and there are less and less stories like this.
And this year's going to be rough in general already.
Yeah,
it's
election
going to be
year,
hard.
Right? It's an election cycle.
Yeah. So.
Maybe we'll talk about. We should go through and do. We could do. Might be fun. See if we can find a newspaper, or a set of newspapers from the third week in July, 1983, or something like that, and just do the entire podcast talking about those subjects. That'd be fun.
We could do 100 years.
Like what was the news like 100 years ago, and then talk about. Yeah. That'd be fun. We should do that. I guarantee you, the farmers are talking about the sunspot.
Use your pen.
Ooh, pen.
Make sure you use your pen. Make a note. I'm down for that. We could do this day in history, or this week in history 100 years ago.
That'd be fun. That'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we could do that.
Yeah.
I'm down for that.
So Rita and Hector are talking in chat, and just to bring it up, if you ever want to hang out with us while we do the podcast, you can do so on YouTube. I mentioned it earlier. We do monitor chat. We don't tend to respond to chat too much on the podcast because if you're listening to us on a podcast, Spotify, whatever else, it doesn't make any sense. But occasionally we'll pick an article out, and talk about it. And Rita was talking about storms not taking down electronics. And I think that's interesting, right? Given where Rita is on the earth. But in Alabama, that is a thing we have a lot of. A lot of storms. In fact, just 2 weeks ago, we had tornadoes rip through a few neighborhoods, and it's just a thing, Oh, those tornadoes. There's naders. And it's weather's getting crazy, Hapa. The sun's yelling at us. Weather's getting crazy. 2024 gonna be interesting. 2025 seems like it'll be more interesting according to NASA.
Don't look up and leave the world behind.
Wow.
I'm telling you.
I think Leave the World Behind was pretty interesting. Don't Look Up was a lot of fun too.
We will talk
Look at
about
that.
that.
I can't remember some of them. Yeah, we will. All right. So next up, we're going to talk about Jeff Bezos' company, Blue Origin.
Right.
And this was also your article. So you want to hit on this?
So I found this interesting because I originally thought that Blue Origin was was attempting to be a direct competitor for SpaceX. I did not realize until I did a little bit more digging that Blue Origin is literally Bezos's wet dream, and probably not a wet dream. It's gonna happen. His way of making money off of folks that would like to go up into low orbit and say they've been to space. I didn't know that. I legitimately thought.
So I didn't either, honestly.
Yeah.
I did not either. So you're saying that SpaceX and Blue Origin. I agree with you. When they first started making news, I heard about them together, and in my head had equated them as competitors. But you're saying that Blue Origin, when you dug into it, Blue Origin is more focused on space, quote unquote, tourism, and by quote unquote, it's low orbit.
That's exactly what it is, tourism. That he actually says that in one of his one of his, I don't want to say speeches.
Well, he's had a couple, like William Shatner went up, right? He had a couple people go up.
Yeah. But they have had launches with cargo on board as well. So I think he has recognized the value that SpaceX is getting money from the U.S. government, NASA and other space agencies to deliver stuff to space. And I think he's kind of shifted the company because they actually had their first successful takeoff, release of the capsule and landing. It was an unmanned flight or whatever of their newest spacecraft, and it the way they didn't specifically say that the weight of the payload and all that, but they said with the payload as well. So I think the way I read it, it looks like he is trying to shift his focus towards doing both, essentially being able to cover the tourist I don't know, want of saying I've been to space and being a competitor to SpaceX, which I'll be honest with you, if you're trying to compete with SpaceX, you're a little bit behind already. Like SpaceX is leaps and bounds, right?
I agree with you. I think Elon Musk is one of the most polarizing and bipolar,
for sure,
genius madman things that
evil,
will ever.
Evil, rich geniuses.
Yeah, he's not. He is whatever he is. But SpaceX, you can't. There's no real denying Tesla, SpaceX, these companies that he's been involved with. There's really no denying how successful they are at the things that they drive forward on.
Yeah.
Does it, cause waves? Sure, it causes waves. But SpaceX is far and away. You're way behind if you're trying to be a payload delivery service for NASA. You got a lot of work to do. SpaceX has gotten pretty good at that.
And when I started looking at the articles and reading through, to me it seems very apparent that they were focused on the tourist side of it, and somewhere in the middle of all that, I don't know if it was Bezos or if some another CEO or head of his board or whatever said we need to do this, because it seems like there was like a direct, like we just took a left turn real quick and changed our goal, like all of a sudden, because they throttled back on all the media attention and everything of delivering, Captain Kirk to frickin' space, and started focusing on the payload side of the house. So to me, that's how it looked. It looked like, hey, we need to directly compete with SpaceX, which I will say it's good. Having competition is good. It's needed. Yes.
I agree. I think that I think that the United States of America, and this is only a reflection on the United States of America's space program. I'm not talking about others. We left ourselves little options when we retired the space shuttle program. The SLS program, which is the one that's intended to take us to Mars and back to the moon, that SLS program is not ready yet. And there was a big gap, and we were depending on Russia to move things back and forth, the ISS for us and whatever. And
here we are.
We had to pay. I mean, we gave SpaceX a lot of money and are giving SpaceX, the taxpayers are giving SpaceX a lot. And when I say a lot, it's incomprehensible the amount of money that we're giving SpaceX, but it would be more incomprehensible not to have the ability to have an American delivery service to space.
I haven't never dug, but it just occurred to me. I wonder how much money in comparison to running NASA still with space missions it is.
I was looking today because I had a bit of a personal vendetta against Barack Obama during his administration because of some comments he made about defunding NASA, and he did not have the authority to defund NASA. But I did look into it today. That it always sat wrong with me. But what I'll say is the budget for NASA was actually kept pretty solid while he was in office. So the budget did make it to NASA. And there were some programs like Mars and some other things that got green-lighted. So it wasn't, as often is with presidents, you love, hate, and then you look a few years on and you're like, oh, okay, it actually wasn't that big of a deal. And but the $21 billion was the number that was then being spent to fund NASA, right? It's like here's $21 billion.
When they had the shuttle?
Post-shuttle.
Okay.
Yeah, so NASA, and this is, we're actually going to talk about this in the next one. I guess we could wind these together, but the privatization of the space industry, these two companies that we're going to talk about in the next article, both of them were given $80 million to start, right? And so NASA was even taking money from the U.S. government, and NASA was saying, hey, let's funnel some of this into privatization. And there's this really interesting thing that's occurring, and I think that people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos understand this really well, is someone else set the pattern.
Right.
Someone else said, how do we get to space? How do we do orbit? How do we get to the moon? Those things have been done.
And we learned
we learned from that. And the information that you learn from that, the engineers, what they learned from that, you can now privatize that. No one's gotten to Mars. And a company's not going to get to Mars before the U.S. government and NASA. I just don't think that's real. Because of what it takes focused-wise to go do that. And so I think that's what NASA seems to be doing is, hey, we'll help pay for some of these things because honestly, could NASA do them? Yes. But if we do that, we're not doing the next thing. Right? If we're focused on this, we're not focused on Mars.
Okay, I can see that.
So they've got these patterns. And so it really struck me a little differently today when I was looking through it and being like, oh, okay, so NASA's funding that. NASA's putting money into that. And I think that SpaceX being the best example, like to your point, they're so far ahead because we're paying SpaceX to take things to, vital equipment experiments. Those things are going up all the time, and we got to have a way to get them there. And I tell you this, Russia ain't doing it for us anymore, right? So who was gonna do that for us?
It's interesting to me to sit and see the differences too, because if you look. And I'm not comparing nations to companies, but if you look at where SpaceX is sitting today and where I don't even know, I didn't even catch what Bezos' actual company is called. I know the craft is called Blue Origin.
I know the company is Blue Origin. The craft
the company is Blue Origin?
Yeah, so the company is Blue Origin. The craft is not that. I can find it.
I couldn't remember if I read that or not. Either way, when you look at in terms of the race, I wonder almost if his company, if Bezos' company might catch up, because SpaceX is already testing the rockets for, what they think will be the Mars mission and a moon landing, right? They're already testing those. They're already launching those. So at this point, sending stuff into orbit and satellites and supplies and things to the International Space Station, like that's just old hand for SpaceX.
That's just what they do now, right?
Yeah, they've been doing it, right? So it's not. And so for you to be talking, they've been doing it for years at this point, and you're talking about Blue Origin just now had the first successful takeoff and landing, by the way, of their craft. I actually saw the video of their landing the craft without the pod on it, and it was kind of cool to watch. But I also think it's amazing that we're doing that too. By the way, we're reusing the craft in fashion. I think.
Well, that was the breakthrough. You know, that was the shuttle breakthrough. It was in. If you go and look through I am a for real space dork, right? Space camp a couple of times. Like I'm that dork. Yeah. But if you look through it, the Russians, when the space race was going on, the Russians took missile systems that they had designed to blow something up.
Yeah.
That was how they got to space. They stuck a dude on top of it. Yeah. And that is pretty effective for one-way travel. You know, those missiles are pretty effective at going one way, but they're made to like go one way, not come back. So the real magic of the Apollo missions that NASA did, and they had to build it from the ground up. The Apollo was the first. Those were the first rockets ever built specifically for space travel. Yeah. They weren't weapons first, right? They weren't a weapon that we put something on top of. They were designed from the ground up to go be space travel. And so the real thing was getting a human being to the moon and getting a human being back from the moon. And that, to me, if I'm Blue Origin, you know, and you were talking about them taking a left-hand turn on space tourism. Space tourism sounds really sexy. I don't want to be responsible for life support.
God,
on a bunch of... No, I can't.
Imagine?
I can't. I mean, the submarine that we had implode.
Right.
Right. Like, if anything goes wrong, it all goes wrong. Right. There's not a little thing goes wrong in those high. If you're that far under the water, right? If you're that far into space, something goes wrong. It's just over. There's no room for error in these things.
Yeah.
But if you have a bunch of experiments on there, which, you know, do these plants grow or do ants form a colony? Whatever the experiments might be, they might be expensive, but they're replaceable. Humans are not replaceable. So I can definitely see taking a turn and being like, let's see if we can just get some cargo.
I mean, surely somebody at his company was like, hey man, the liability here, like alone, is kind of insane. Like I get that you're gonna like the amount of money. I don't know how much it cost for that group to go per person, but it had to have been astronomical just to cover the liability, right? Alone. Like God help.
And
could you imagine if you freaking lost Captain Kirk?
That's exactly it. Hey, can you imagine being the insurance agent when Jeff Bezos walks in
Jesus.
and he's like, I'd like to insure a flight. And they're like, sir, you are worth more than our company.
Yeah.
The insuring is just your pocketbook. We can't.
Yeah.
We could give you our whole, if something goes wrong, we could give you our whole company and we still wouldn't cover it. You could have everything. That chair, that clock on the wall, you can have it. It still won't cover it. So like, I can't imagine.
At least in the case of SpaceX, the crew, if they have a crew, because a lot of their flights are automated.
Yep.
If they had a crew, you've got a crew that is trained to do X, Y, and Z. They understand that I may not come back, but this is still the job that I choose. A tourist may understand, but they probably don't understand. Like, let's be honest. Like, again, I hate to keep bringing it up, but like the submarine implosion is a perfect example. Like these 100%. Folks did not understand like what they were actually getting into. Actually, the only one that did understand was that poor freaking kid that
said he didn't want to do it.
Came along. Yes, like
and
so that's the thing that and that's why it kind of strikes me that he is. It seems like they are trying to veer away from the tourist idea, and do the be an alternative to SpaceX, maybe, you know. But for me, at least, looking at their track record, they've got a very, very long way to go. So
the one that launched recently, the experiments on board it were from a previous flight. So there was a flight last year, September 2022, maybe somewhere around there. There was a rocket they were going to launch. And it had these experiments on board. You know, NASA had some experiments on their, companies have experiments on there, whatever it is. And the rocket veered off. They did save the capsule, however. So they made good on it, right? They came back a year plus later and they were like, hey, look, your experiments went to space. They made good on it. And maybe that's something to be said. I've never gone to space. I've built model rockets, and those things are hard enough to build, right? But the money required to do these things correctly is one aspect. The time required to do them correctly is not negotiable. And that's one of the things that NASA kind of constantly ran into when you look at the space program when we were sending people to the moon. These astronauts, what you were talking about is very important. Every human being involved knew everything about what they were doing. And when I say everything, I mean they could have rewired the entire capsule.
Yeah.
Each individual, right? They know everything, and NASA makes sure they understand every single thing because it's important that they know, look, oxygen behaves this way in space. I'm responsible for the whole, it's a whole thing. Tourists do not do that.
No, they're not there to do that. They're there to be excited.
They spray paint, cave paintings, right?
Yeah,
tourists are.
Yeah, well,
like tourists ransack catacombs. Like tourists are not.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe if you could strap them down.
I don't think that's
completely
that's how
strapped.
That works. I don't
completely strapped down. Their face is all I went to space. I don't know.
Here you are.
Yeah,
there you go.
Exactly. What was the movie with Mel Gibson where he was locked in the chair and his eyes were? Conspiracy theory. Conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Maybe that's.
I don't know. I'm wondering. To me, what is the space tourism? I don't think is even a thing that SpaceX would want to entertain right now, I think, because we're still wrapping our heads around the idea that we're trying to revisit the moon, and we're trying to get to Mars, and we're trying to do this, and trying to do that, right? Like, I don't think that would be a thing until, I think, maybe going to Mars is old hand, maybe.
Yeah, there's so the next piece we're going to talk about is probably what we're talking about, and the subject is privatization, how we will explore space, and we're kind of hitting on that because two companies are launching to go to the moon. In the past year or so, we had India and China actually landed on the moon. We had Russia and Japan, quote unquote, land on the moon by smacking into it.
They tried.
Yeah, they destroyed their craft. Getting to the moon is not hard.
Yeah.
Stopping on the moon is extremely hard, right?
Successfully stopping. You can stop all day. It's successfully
slowing down enough to not explode when you hit the moon is a way different thing.
What did you call it? So, a unplanned,
rapid, unplanned, braking mechanism. And so these companies, and I wrote it down. This was your article.
Yep.
If you want to introduce it, but I wrote down some notes. And I think this one to me is probably my favorite.
Well, the thing that I like about it, first of all, is that in a lot of these articles I'm starting to notice this, and I'm actually taking note and seeing if this is the case. But both companies aren't out of the U.S. I like that. One of the one of the companies was out of was it Pittsburgh? No, it was out of
no,
it was
Pittsburgh.
Out of Pittsburgh.
There was one was out of Pittsburgh. Yep.
And then the other one was out of. It was not in the U.S. Wasn't it India? No.
I don't know where the other one was from.
I think I read it was in India or. I have to read it.
Astrobotic Technology was from Pittsburgh. The other one was Intuitive Machines.
Yeah, I didn't see where it's.
That was the other company.
Intuitive
Machines. Where are you from? Where are you from, Intuitive Machines?
I apologize. I need to start getting a little bit better of talking.
Oh man, these guys are Houston. Yeah, Houston.
Oh, it was out of Houston. For some reason, I read that it wasn't in the U.S. But anyway, the point behind the article was specifically, and we've talked about it before too. Is if you've watched that show For All Mankind, they actually talked directly to this, and it's funny because I read another article where they were talking about how it's just conjecture, but they were like, well, For All Mankind is like foretelling the future. It's the fact that governments won't be able to fund or focus on any kind of space program because we're so wrapped up in our own crap here on the planet that trying to create enough interest to have innovation, which is what you need, obviously, in this theater of science, is going to take privatization. But we're already seeing that, right? We're already seeing that with Blue Origin. We're already seeing that with SpaceX. It's already happening. But one of the things I wanted to ask is, like, do you think it's a good thing? Like, do you think the privatization or a private company getting money from governments to do this is a good thing?
I will say I oscillate probably on this one. And part of this is the fact that I don't trust companies.
Sure.
Companies are, we can say they're people if we want, they're not. They are machines made by people to attract and retain as much money as possible. That is what a company
literally
is for.
Yeah.
Right. That is the entire purpose of a company. And I am not denigrating that. I'm saying that's how our society works. That's what a company is built to do.
Yeah,
there are not for profit.
That's literally
right, good or bad. That's just for the objective reality, right?
Yeah.
I mean, let's run through this, right? Let's say Hapa and Seven say, hey, let's start a company together. The only reason we would do that is for legal protections on income.
Yeah.
There's no other reason for you and I to go start a company. So the entire purpose of founding a company is to say, we're going to put money there so someone can't sue Hapa and can't sue Seven. They have to sue the company first. And so that's why you form LLCs. That's why you do these things. And there's tax ramifications, all this stuff. But companies, to me, are not things to be trusted. Now, I'm not talking about not-for-profits, right? I have a soft spot for not-for-profits. Like nonprofits, different. These are not nonprofit companies. And so I think in some ways, I love that NASA. So these two companies, right, in 2019, both got $80 million to figure out how to get to the moon. And what they're going to put on the moon is robots, right? They're going to put landers on the moon.
And they're small. They're not like these giant, they're a couple of them. I think one of them said is shoebox size.
They're not. I mean, And one of them is going on a brand new spacecraft, which I'd never heard of. United Launch Alliance is the company, and they have a spacecraft called Vulcan. I got to look into this. I didn't look into it, but that's a brand new thing. The other one is catching a ride with SpaceX. And so they're going to go to the moon. So NASA is like, just by spending $160 million, that's a good budget play, right? I spent $160 million, and I'm going to be able to put some stuff on the moon. That's a brilliant use of money. $160 million would not get us to the moon through NASA.
Hell no.
This wouldn't happen.
So here you are. One of the companies, $80 million, is going to land the Astrobotic, which is the name of the actual rover, on the southern hemisphere and look for ice. Because on the dark side of the moon, it's estimated that there are billions of pounds of liquid ice.
Yeah, water ice.
Which, if anybody knows anything about science, if you've got liquid ice, water ice, H2O, you have all you need to make a colony. You don't need to send fuel, which is one of the biggest issues with space flight is the amount of fuel you need compared to the size of the weight of the cargo. Well, the more cargo, the exponentially more fuel you need. And then when you land on the planet, if you're trying to make a habitat or whatever, now you've got to send all that stuff to make the habitat. Well, if you've got water, that removes a lot of the weight because you don't need fuel. Right?
Completely dead weight, right? The thing about fuel, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so $80 million paid to a private company, land a rover. If they find ice, that's the jackpot for the $80 million we spent, right? Like,
this is a drop in the bucket for what they're trying to spend to get up there. So on one hand, I'm like, hell yes, I think that was a great idea. On the other hand, I've seen what companies do when they get further down this path.
Yeah.
And look, every science fiction, every cyberpunk genre, like it. They're ingrained into my head that companies will not behave in the best interest of humanity. They will behave in the best interest of shareholders. And that is a very small subset of humanity that they're trying to help. So it's not like these companies are going to go to the moon because, we're trying to help out. No, they're going to the moon because they think they can make some money in some way, shape, or form. That's not a bad thing. But if you take that to the nth degree, and companies start controlling access to things like the moon, right? And companies start controlling access to things like Mars. Right? That's what all these science fiction movies are written around.
I was literally going to say, that's literally what you see in all of them, right?
All of them, right? So it's interesting because you were talking about the fuel, and I think this is what I want to kind of come back to here is you spend $160 million. One of these missions is going to the South Pole, basically, of the moon,
Yep.
where they think they've got all this water ice.
Yeah.
And fuel is an incredibly... I used to race cars, you know this about me, but I used to build and race cars. Fuel is an incredibly interesting concept because fuel has to generate more energy than it weighs.
Yeah.
That seems like, oh, it's on the surface. Yes, that's simple. It's not. There's a reason we still use gasoline and not ethanol, right? It's because gasoline generates far more energy than its weight. In other words, it can carry itself and a car.
Yeah.
And tow a boat and all these things that we do with it. So if you get up to the moon, because the next step is, hey, can we build colonies on the moon? And can we launch missions from the moon where our gravitational pull is nowhere near the same? So vehicles leaving the moon to go to Mars would need far less fuel to have done so.
Sure.
And all they need is water. That's it. That's the thing they need. And if they spend $80 million and they find water, first of all, it's gonna turn into, I think it's gonna turn into for all mankind. If they announce that, it's gonna be...
Everybody needs to get there as quick as they can and lay
100%. 100%. And I would tell you, one of the things I think Joe Biden is extremely good at, I'm not getting political, but he's a statesman. He believes in relationships and handshakes and making deals, and he's quiet about it, right? So he makes deals when, I'm not gonna say behind closed doors, but he makes deals in private and then announces them publicly.
Sure.
And to that end, if they get a report back, little shoebox rovers like, oh man, I found water, and it's 100 miles deep, right? And they're like, they found water. What happens next?
Yeah.
That's really...
We need to make as many friends as we can that will say that we will all make claims together.
Yes.
Before
and we got a couple
big evil other guys get there. Right?
Yep. And we happen to have a guy in Russia right now who ain't playing ball anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So I think all
and that's the worst part about
is
this.
We've
talked about this too, is how science and scientists don't like looking at things by nationality or political standings or stuff like that. Unfortunately, politicians get involved, and that makes the biggest part of the problem of this entire thing. But you hit it on the head on the head of the nail. Like, if you haven't seen For All Mankind, you probably should watch it, because it's interesting to me. I watched that show, and then I'm seeing a lot of these articles because it's like, Jesus, like how it's working. The thing that worries me is, do you remember? I'm sure you remember the Challenger explosion. Do you remember what caused the Challenger explosion?
I do.
So it was a faulty O-ring. And it was a company that was making O-rings and decided to try to cut costs producing the O-rings to maximize profits from NASA. And they were using products that weren't up to spec in those O-rings. And that was the final result. That company went out of business immediately, like, obviously, after the Challenger blew up. That's what I'm worried about in terms of privatization. You get companies that are going to sell all these payloads or whatever in the name of freedom and blah 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 and exploration, and we need to do it with the cheapest possible, not necessarily safe means necessary, right?
Well, I mean, so I looked it up, and the United States of America defense budget for 2023, $761.681 billion.
It's insane.
Okay, so nearing $1 trillion. The NASA budget for 2023, $26 billion.
Yep.
And I've said it on this podcast before. I will say it many times in the future to anyone who will listen. Your NASA is building things to explore, not destroy.
Yep.
And you are far more likely to be able to get other humans involved and behind and participating in something like that than you are in weapon systems. We deliver our weapon systems more than we deliver our message of exploration.
Yeah, for sure.
And so to me, if you're going to tell them, NASA, you get $23 billion, whatever it is, which is fairly unchanged. The Obama administration was 21. It hasn't gone up that much.
Yeah.
And you're going to be like, they spent 160 million on a couple of companies. They're going to get to the moon. They're going to have another manned mission to the moon. The United States is still the only country to put a man on the moon, by the way. Nobody else has done that. And it's not because they can't put a man on the moon. It's because they can't get him home. Yeah. And that's the things NASA cares about. And I don't think everybody everywhere cares about bringing them home.
I would 100% agree with that.
Yeah. And that's a dark. When you find something valuable in space, we will see what humanity's made of.
I can't remember what show it was I was watching. They were talking about the first missions to the moon, the first missions to orbit, where there were literally protocols in place to end whatever mission it was to try to bring the astronaut home at a risk of the mission failure. They didn't care if they didn't make it to
100%. 100%.
Whatever. The goal was always to bring the human back, and I think you are. Yep. I think you hit the nail on the head. There's nations on this planet that are they. Hey, we got a guy up into space. Awesome. Something screwed up. We can't bring him home. Oh well.
Well, there's nations, and I promise you, there's companies.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, there's companies building submarines out of carbon fiber and telling people it's safe. Companies just do stuff.
And that's what scares me for the privatization, right? Because you can say that you have to have these standards and these rules, and which that again to go back to the submarine, there are standards, there were requirements, there were things to say, to get your little certificate saying stuff is safe, right? And he bypassed all that, and you still had tourists that went aboard, and they still died, right? Like, so this is like. At what point are we like, oh, we're going to go to the moon and we're going to have 150 tourists, and then you lost them all because some idiot wanted to cut corners.
Well, I mean, you talk about, an organization, companies, you're in the boardroom, you talk about acceptable losses.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
You do talk about that. And normally that's normal course of business, right? You're talking about acceptable losses. And what does that mean? Oh, it means we lost a sale.
Yeah.
Right. Someone chose our competitor
lives.
Over us.
Right.
Not we lost an entire crew of human beings.
Yeah.
But that's the terms that companies talk in, because they're machines that are built to decide on a spreadsheet whether something made money or lost it. And based on that one thing, they determine success or failure. So to me, you ask the question, and this is all a conversation around this question, do I think that, privatization is good or bad? I think it's both. But I'm not necessarily a big government guy, an oversight guy. But there are times when I'm like, okay, the FDA is probably a good one. OSHA probably not bad, right? The EPA, I'm kind of there for that, seeing what it did to what pollution and stuff does to my home state. So there's times when you look at it and you're like, it just makes sense for humanity to have like these oversights, and companies won't do it themselves, right? So I don't know how there are probably ways to control the purse strings and be like, hey, look, we're going to give you this $80 million, but you got to meet our safety specs, right?
For sure.
Or we're not sending it, and we're not giving you the money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, and I would love to see, I would not hate it if NASA became, in the software industry, we have pattern making, right? And this doesn't come from software, but back when you would make things out of wood, right? You had a wood shop that would cut things, but you also had a pattern maker. The pattern maker was the most senior person. They would actually make a pattern first, and then the rest of the wood shop would cut it. Pattern making, right? The less skilled people can cut the pattern. They don't make the pattern.
Right.
And I think the same thing happens in software and many other industries. And I think that NASA is maybe, I'm hoping, falling into that kind of realm of thought where it's like, the pattern to going to the moon is this. And we want you guys to find a way to do it cheaper. Here's $80 million. You need 20 million more. Come talk to us. Show us your progress. Maybe we'll help. Yeah. But you go to the moon this way safely. You do this. You don't, by the way, pet peeve of mine, you don't leave a bunch of space junk flying around the planet.
Right.
in the process to tear down, something else that we put up there. Here's the rules you follow. But who enforces those, and whose do we follow? The United States happens to be the most quote unquote advanced only because we put a man on the moon.
Yeah.
right? So
Haven't done
internationally,
it in 50, 60 years, so.
yeah, I think internationally it would be nice if there was a look. The UN has its hits and misses. We haven't had a major war between superpowers since the UN was around.
Sure.
So I think it's had more successes than failures. It was meant to stop those wars. It's done that job so far. I would love to see all the nations in the UN come together, or a UN style body, and say, hey, look, how do we do this in a way that doesn't make it so that we screw up Mars the same way we're screwing up Earth? For
sure. And I think, I mean, I'd like to be optimistic and say, because like SpaceX is, and I keep going back to SpaceX, is they're the only real thing that we have right now, right?
Yep.
They haven't had a major failure where they've lost lives, right? So
correct.
Most of the rules, regulations, and required specs that NASA went by with the shuttle were all written in blood, for sure. Like 100%. Things happen. Yeah. You know, unfortunately, in the Apollo program, you had, you know, astronauts that got locked in a capsule that had a fire inside of it. They found out, oh, gee, somebody was like, well, we don't need to have a release latch on the inside of the capsule because they don't want to get out. They're in a space.
Yep.
Actually, turns out you kind of want that, right?
Yep.
We want to have standards of quality of product for O-rings and sealing compounds and things. Guess what? Challenger blew up. Well, we're going to probably pay attention to that a little bit more. We need to have better standards of our heat shielding. You know, unfortunately, we had Discovery that, you know, was it Discovery? Was the one that had the panel came off and they broke up
Discovery lose a panel?
They came home. Was it Discovery or?
I think it was, actually.
Now. But
that was the one on the return. Yep.
Yeah, on the return they broke
Columbia.
up in Columbia.
Columbia.
Me, okay.
Yeah, Discovery's still in the museum. Yeah, Columbia.
Right. So I mean, you know, unfortunately, and that's 9 times out of 10 how government agencies are going to write rules. A lot of times is unfortunately they're written as a result of blood that's given.
I think it's interesting you mentioned that because Challenger, I was sitting in school and Challenger was a big deal.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah.
because it was the first time a teacher had gone to space, and all the kids in school were like, "Oh, man, teacher!"
Everyone's
space.
watching,
So
unfortunately.
we're watching it, right? And the thing disintegrates, and you're like, all the kids are looking around like, "What's happening?" And the teacher's like, "Turn it off," you know. And and then you got one of the greatest speeches ever given by, which was given by Reagan in response to that. But you had Challenger, which was 1986, and you had Columbia, which was 2003.
Yep.
And so NASA's record is really good.
Insane, right?
And the thing is, though, NASA takes a long time to get there. And I think that's where privatization does help, right? Because
it does expedite that process.
Yeah, the experimentation, the move fast and break stuff kind of thought pattern people like Elon Musk have, where it's like, I don't care. Burn the engine. Burn the engine. Burn the engine. Burn the engine. Is it good enough? Let's try it with no one on it. Like, let's go. And so, I don't know, man. I oscillate, and I've done it in this conversation between, I think privatization is some really good things. And honestly, it hasn't done a lot of bad things yet. So I am prejudging, right? I am prejudging companies, and I shouldn't do that. But my human history tells me that companies are not always looking out the best interest. So if we can solve that one thing, then privatization is potentially how we get further into exploration.
Yeah.
I would love to see companies paid to do that rather than blow up bridges just to rebuild.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I'm super excited because the technology that we have now, we're able to do these unmanned tests.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because I don't know how difficult it was back in the 80s and in the 70s and 60s when they were, I imagine it was very difficult in the 60s and 70s when computers were not great. But now we have the technology to be able to do all these test flights unmanned and not put people in harm's way, which I think is fantastic. So, and there may be an aspect there as well. So,
I think there is, and we have, it's interesting. I don't know if you've been, and I haven't been in a while, but there's a display at the Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama, and talking about Mars, the Mars mission, and kind of how they're planning to do some of that. And the moon is a really good testing ground for that. But what they want to do is they want to send first materials and robots, right? They can automate the building of habitats.
Right.
A human being doesn't have to go build the habitat. They can automate all that stuff. So we've advanced from a technological standpoint to where we can do that, right? We can send big 3D printers that print metal. We can send the materials for that, and we can do that in as many trips as we want to do it. And if we lose it, it sucks, right? We lose $100 million in equipment or $1 billion in equipment. But no people died. Yeah. And we can do that as many times as we need to do it, and we can create a logistics chain and do that. But when there's people on it, when there's people involved, the value of life, not every country values life the same. And companies don't value it. Traditionally, companies are not incentivized to place a high value on it, right? There's too many stories otherwise. So I don't know, man. I don't know. What are your thoughts? What do you think? On the whole, do you think it's a good thing, a bad thing? What do you think?
I unfortunately am I'm at a place where I'm like, well, we have to just wait it out and see. Because right now, now it is the perfect solution. Right now, for me, the way things are.
That's actually a really fair statement. If we're going to do this, it's the only way we have available. That's not a bad statement.
And I've never been one of those people. It's like, well, we need to just stop. We need, like, when they retired the shuttles, I remember thinking, like, it's definitely the nerd side of me. Like, I would lay in bed at night and be like, well, we're never gonna, like, how are we gonna do this? Like, we're not gonna go back to space. We're just like, absolutely. The hell with it. We're not gonna do it, right?
Yeah.
So to see something like SpaceX, and for me too, to see something like SpaceX and Blue Origin using reusable craft, that to me is phenomenal. Like, because that saves time, that saves money, that saves everything, right? Like, so I don't know, man. I think I hate to say it, maybe another 20 years we'll have to revisit this conversation when we're Rogan big, you know.
when we have our own space tourism thing figured out.
Yep. Yeah.
Our low orbit hotel, like in For All Mankind. That was a crazy episode. So I think it's a great point. I think actually, you know, from a conversational standpoint, I think you kind of put a bow on it, which is how else are you going to do it right now?
Yeah.
And what's interesting there is the shuttles were aging. I promise you, someone at NASA talked to the Obama administration, was like, look, these things are probably 10 years beyond already.
I bet you when the Columbia thing happened, somebody at NASA said this is going to start becoming commonplace. Like, they're done.
Right. They're old. Yep. Right. It's not there. I will say, I don't know if you knew this, but the SLS program, which is the program that NASA is putting together, it's the launch system program. Is using shuttle stuff. So the boosters and all that stuff are still being used. So I think it was just the shuttle itself that probably aged out, and we needed new solutions. Previous administrations had not invested in the solutions soon enough if we wanted it not to be privatized. Therefore, our only way to do it is to privatize it. And honestly, kind of glad that some of these, I don't love how much money the Elon Musks of the world. I think that's ridiculous. I think Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, all these tech billionaires who are the dragons on a horde right now, right? They're richer than anyone's ever been in history. They're richer than the 100 richest people in history. Like, this is crazy. That's kind of crazy, but at least you know, these are the only people who can afford to do this.
They're making it happen.
I'm glad someone's doing it. I'm glad someone's doing it. Yep.
Yeah. And I mean, you're at a place too where you're looking at, let's say that they made a plan to do a replacement for the shuttle. The cost to produce that would be astronomically out of control compared to what shuttles were, just because the way the contracting and everything works nowadays, like just in general. So for the government, it's also probably a slam dunk for them to be able to say, here's $80 million, go find ice on the moon, versus I need to spend even $1 billion to do it ourselves, right? Like, So.
We have you know, it's funny. We have, in the business world, you have to make decisions sometimes about whether you're going to outsource something and have a contractor do it, or whether you're going to do it internally, right? So am I going to build something in my company? Am I going to allocate my human resources to do a thing, or am I going to get a contractor to do it? And when you have those conversations, one of the things I love bringing up, especially when I was doing consulting, one of the things I would love bringing up to people is, if you do it internally, you lose the ability to use money as the motivator. Right. Because there's an interesting thing about employees, which is they're going to get their salary.
Yeah.
You can fire them. That's it. With a contractor, with a consultant, you can say, look, this is $80 million. I'm going to give it to you if you do these things.
Yeah.
And if you don't do these things, I ain't giving it to you. And so you can use the money back and forth because they get 90% through with the project and they're like, hey, can we do it this way? No, I want it the right way for $80 million.
Yep.
And there is something to be said for intelligent controls of, using money as the way to say, hey, you did or did not meet the expectations. Now, if the military industrial complex is any example, we'll have a lot of waste in there. And we got to keep an eye on that. But at the same time, at least right now, it looks like NASA, maybe that's it. Maybe NASA needs to be the trusted oversight committee for all this fund appropriation.
I kind of feel like that's probably what they are, probably. I'd imagine.
Yeah, that's what's happening, right?
Yeah,
but maybe that's it. Maybe they are so pure of science, right, that they can.
I hope so.
They can make this work.
I hope so. That's a perfect stance to have. Is hopefully they are pure of science. I mean, that's the big deal, right? Keep policy and political stances out of the decision making and policy making there, because scientists are scientists, or they should hopefully be, regardless of where they live, where they grew up, and the political leanings that they are in.
Yep.
Right. So
100%.
Hopefully
that should be the endeavor, right?
Yeah.
Well, cool. So Hapa, I think we can put a bow on that conversation.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about some of this stuff, but I'm curious, and this is one of my favorite parts of every podcast. What you watching, Hapa?
So I think last podcast I mentioned I had started watching In the Mind of a Chef again. In the Mind of a Chef is a great show, another Anthony Bourdain production. I've started watching some of his shows. The last show that he had, which is The Layover. And The Layover's premise legitimately is, if you have a layover in Paris or Toronto or Chicago,
I love that
or Atlanta,
show.
whatever.
Yep.
And you have 48 hours. What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? What are you going to see? And so I've started watching that. It's been nice because I've been seeing a lot of. I remembered these places that I was like, I took mental note. I want to go visit. I'm taking mental note again, and it's giving me the travel bug again because I love road tripping and seeing new places. And whatever. But just a conversation and reminder every now and then that we're all people, and people interacting with people is good, and be good when you're out there interacting with said people and have a good time and so on and so forth. It's been wonderful. A wonderful reminder, especially with all of the crap that's going on right now out there. It's been a nice little reminder of that. But on the new front, and we mentioned it earlier, Leave the World Behind.
Yeah.
I started watching this, and I messaged Seven and was like, have you watched Leave the World Behind? I was in the middle of the movie at the time.
Oh, is that when you messaged me?
Yeah. He's like, oh yeah. I was like, this movie is crazy. He's like, all right, well, message you when you're done, because I know he didn't want to talk about it while I was still watching it or whatever.
Well, I definitely didn't want to talk about anywhere near the end of it, right?
Oh man.
Do you want to talk about it? Do we want to just tell people, hey, look, if you haven't seen this and you don't want spoilers, now's a good time to.
It's been on Netflix for 2 months, over 2 months.
So here, let's do it that way. Like, look,
we won't. How about this? I just won't tell the end. We won't talk about the ending. Why don't we just not talk about the ending?
I will talk about it in broad strokes. If that bothers anyone, now is the time to stop listening.
Yeah.
But yeah,
which we appreciate you for listening up to now.
we do, and we won't dismiss you just yet. Catch us on where you get your podcast. But we won't give away direct spoilers. But the movie is a Netflix original movie.
Yep.
And
which, by the way, they haven't had a good one in a while. So I've been.
Yeah, they have. Right. But Julia Roberts.
Yep.
Is in it, and Ethan Hawke is in it, and Kevin Bacon's in it, and Mahershala Ali is in it. So it's a really good, really fantastic, interesting, kind of deep brain watch. It's there's nothing on the surface about that movie, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And does it have messages? Of course, right? But at the end of the day, it was a very interesting look at a subject that I just find fascinating. So, that is as far as I will go. If you want to talk more about it, I'm game for however much you want to talk about it.
Well, I mean, you can kind of derive from the title, Leave the World Behind. It's essentially talking about the end of the world, right? I love shows like this or movies like this anytime when it kind of breaks down and shows how people will interact in the situation.
Yeah.
That's why I love Don't Look Up, which is another one.
Yeah.
If you haven't watched, you need to go watch it.
Yeah, Don't Look Up. If you've missed on Don't Look Up, seriously, stop what you're doing and go watch it.
It is a perfect diatribe on the realistic world of today. Like, if you haven't seen the movie Idiocracy, we joke all the time that Idiocracy was actually a documentary. Okay. Yeah. Don't Look Up, in my opinion, is the same level of documentary. But Leave the World Behind, and I don't know if you want to talk about this necessarily, but I had talked about how it got review bombed.
So I had not heard about that until you said something to me. I found that very interesting. I never heard of it
until I saw it. Like,
crazy to me.
So, for those of you that might be listening, you might
look at eating?
Reviews. Yeah, sorry, I got a mint I had to put in my mouth. Horrible. I had to. If you hear us talking about the movie and you go to look at the reviews to decide if you're going to watch it, I would highly suggest you just watch it, because I don't know what it's up to now, but at the time that I found it, it was like 9,900 or almost 10,000 reviews were negative on it. And all it was like, I looked through about 20 before I gave up, but there was literally a copy and paste sentence. Every single review was a copy and paste sentence. There was, because the Obamas helped produce it. Okay. And that grabbed a lot of attention for tinfoil hat.
A lot of people hate them some Obama, don't they?
And so there was political statements in the review. There was negative stuff in there. It just, to me, the fact that you see this paragraph that somebody wrote already, I'm like, well, that's not a bot. You know, somebody took the time to write a whole paragraph. But then you look at the next review and it's copy and paste. And you look at the next review and it's copy and paste. And it's over and over and over. All these different screen names, the exact same. It's like, okay, well, somebody is obviously review bombing this movie, but it's kind of silly. But I think it's a great take on how people interact in this instance, and I think it's also a great take on how. And I've been trying to figure out how Seven and I would talk about this on a podcast, because I've wanted to talk about, like, if things broke down where you might think you would land. But I do worry about whether we could even talk about that, really. Like, I don't.
Yeah. All right.
So, I don't know. It's a subject I've kind of
and that's probably worth. That's probably worth, as the movie goes, for people to understand. So I did not know until you had told me. You know, you were texting me one day, and it was like, dude, the review bombs on this movie, and we'd both watched it, and it's not a fluffy movie, right? So if you go into this movie and you're like, I'm looking for fluffy entertainment, that is not what this is. This is get you out of your lizard brain level.
For sure.
It's a deep thought. And there's some cheese in it, right? It is a Netflix movie. It was probably partially done during the writer's strike. Like, it's not a perfect movie, but the concepts of the movie are extremely fascinating to me. And we had talked about series like The Walking Dead, right? And The Walking Dead, the zombies weren't the scary thing in The Walking Dead, right? You start by watching The Walking Dead, you're like, oh, zombies, scary. And then you realize a couple of seasons in, the zombies ain't the scary part.
Yeah.
The people who are not zombies and the way they treat each other and the way they interact and the way they mess with each other and all that's the creepy part. So this movie is more about the psychology of what's going on between a set of human beings and a very small set of human beings on a very small set, right? So it's a house and like maybe a 20-acre plot the entire movie is set on. So it's not like it's a huge movie. It's not fluffy. And it is not designed to make you feel good. That is not the purpose of this movie. And so walk into it knowing that. And I think if you walk into it knowing that, it's much like Don't Look Up, right? There's a statement being made in Don't Look Up, which is like, seriously, don't look up, right? And you watch that movie and you're like, yeah, that seems pretty on the nose. It's funny and it's light, but wow,
yet here we are.
And so I think this is similar, right? In the premise of this movie to me, is what if nobody's in control?
Oh yeah.
Right? What if
that's a fantastic point.
That's to me, there is, and we won't talk about the ending of it, obviously, but that is to me that what I walked away, because I thought about it. Mel, my wife and I watched it, and we were like, we walked away from it, and I said, let me think about this for a minute. The next day you're thinking about it, and like the second day after, I was like, oh, what if nobody is in control? And we've been sitting here talking about, governments. Our entire podcast has been about governmental structures, and that's the thing that we all exist within. What if that's not real?
Yeah. And then the reality breaks down, and you see it.
Yeah. What if it wasn't real, and it literally is just like, it's just the concept of it's no longer there? What happens?
I will say, like, that'll just cause some anxiety for some people, because, I mean, it's a real thing that people probably worry about, but like that idea of, even a decade ago, if the cell phone system went down, you could probably make a phone call somewhere, right?
Yeah,
You could probably find a payphone or something.
That's a good point.
Or like call for help. But right now, in today, if you take a look around your house, let's say you lose power and there's no cell reception.
Oh yeah.
Are you able to call for help or even figure out what the next step is? Like, what do I do? What do I do for water? What do I do for heat? What do I do for cooking? What do I cook the stuff that's in the fridge? Because you don't know. Like, you literally, none of that stuff is something that anybody knows what to do, right? Like,
no, we have routines, and they are extremely comfortable.
Yep.
Extremely comfortable.
Yeah.
And we live under the premise that the systems that make those routines possible will continue to function.
Right.
From consumerism, right, which is pretty much destroying our planet, society, mentality, well-being, right? Yeah. When I say consumerism, I don't mean buying food to feed yourself. I mean spending $125,000 on Christmas gifts for a 9-year-old.
Right.
Right. There's differences. And and so to me, like, that is not sustainable, even if the systems remain in place. But that's what some people depend on day to day, right? To be able to survive. And it's not a long arc if those things don't exist anymore. A lot of people are not gonna. It'll be pretty weird. It'll be pretty weird pretty quick.
Full on Mad Max kind of freaking thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's kind of scary.
Yep.
I'd suggest to you, write it down for something you need to watch. It's called "This Is How It Ends." Forrest Whitaker is in that movie.
I love Forrest Whitaker.
Theo James. I think it's on Netflix. Maybe, I can't remember. You can watch it for free. The movie's about 5 years old, but it's very similar. In line with Leave the World Behind, and
gotcha.
that is another good movie. Actually, it's not a really high production value movie, but yeah, this is how it ends. If you see Forrest Whitaker on there, this is how it ends. You know that you got the movie. But yeah, I would suggest you go watch it. But yeah, so I mean that's one of those things. Is like I said, it was funny because Seven and I, as I was, Rita and I were watching it. But I was like messaging Seven through the whole thing, like, "Oh my god, like you're ending! Oh my god!" Like it was crazy. Like that movie is it's worth a night of chilling and watching.
Oh
Netflix,
yeah, it's worth the investment, and it's honestly worth the brain time. I mean, we've talked, we talk a lot about the stuff you watch. Every podcast we do that. We're actually talking about this, and I have a feeling if we were allowed to talk about it in a way that was spoiler laden, right? Where we were kind of being open about it, we could talk about this movie for a good 20 minutes. Oh, and that's unusual, right? Just that on the face of it. Any movie that you can talk about with friends for 15, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, it's worth the watch, right? Because that's bonding time you don't get any other way, right? So like to me, the movie was worth watching. I cannot believe people are review bombing it. That kind of sucks.
It blows me away,
Yeah, but it's not a perfect movie, but I will say, walk into it. If you walk into it open-eyed, ready for an experience, definitely worth it. And I'm actually going to send you something. And I won't talk about it here, but don't let me forget. I need to send you a watch, and we'll see if we can get on the list for maybe the next podcast.
Okay, for sure. So what you listening to?
Yeah.
What you hearing?
All right. Yeah. So, as you know, I do a new music playlist every Friday. And you get to the end of November, usually the last Friday in November, all the way through December, there's no new albums coming out. And people just let Christmas music kind of run its course.
Sure, yeah.
And usually it doesn't come back around until like the end of January. And so my 2023 favorite albums playlist was 776 songs. It was 66 albums that ran for over 48 hours end to end. And so obviously I've been listening to that. However, the last album in particular was one Neil Young did it. And so it's a Neil Young album called Before and After. And it's Neil Young. And to me, Neil Young is mandatory listening no matter what. Willie Nelson had 2 albums. Willie Nelson had 2 albums, and my favorite album was 2023. There's certain people that are just like, that whatever you do is worth. Lucas Nelson, right? Like there were 3 Nelson albums last year. But Neil Young is one of these people. And Neil Young, if I don't know if you've followed much of where he is today, but he sits on a porch yelling at clouds most of the time. He's just angry. And I read this interview with Neil Young in Rolling Stone, and it was a long interview. He doesn't do a lot of them now. He's just he's jaded towards the music industry, and a lot of that occurred through music perfection. And so when you read about what he's saying or you hear him talk about it, one of the things that Neil Young hates is perfection. And what he says is the only reason music is good is because it's imperfect. Now, he contends the musician should try to be as perfect as possible, but flaws are human.
Yeah.
And so he gets really worked up when someone is like electronic music, where computers are making or machines are having perfect music. Right. He hates it. He hates streaming in particular, because there was this whole period of time where streaming, I don't hate streaming. I hate what streaming has done to the music industry. It's a travesty. The artist got, as it always is, got squeezed more than anybody else. You've got Weird Al Yankovic making 3 cents a year on Spotify, right? Like that's ridiculous. Yeah. But what really happened during the time when people started trading music and streaming music is the quality of music went down. And what I mean by quality is not the quality of musicianship, but the file size had to get smaller because bandwidth was limited. People were using dial-up. And so what happened is a lot of the really interesting parts of the music, if you're like a true music purist, got lost because it just got cut off to make the file smaller. And so Neil Young's new album, if you get a chance to listen to it in like a super high quality, you should do that, because he's one of those artists. Warren Haynes is another one. They just value that super intimate, the instrument matters, the kind of strings I use matters, right? The picks matter. And there's just so much texture to the album. So yeah, if you get a chance, check it out. It's Neil Young, Before and After. A lot of stuff on there. Great albums to sit down and listen to.
Studio album. That's nuts.
It's crazy, right?
45th.
Yep. He took a break from yelling at the clouds to make an album, and I'm glad he did.
Yeah. No, it's fantastic. I like that. I still love that these artists they're getting up there in years, but they're still kicking out albums, man. I think that's
There's
awesome.
no way we get a lot more from Willie Nelson. There's just no way.
No.
That man is pickles at this point. Hey, how old is Willie? That's a great question. The man is like smoked weed on the top of the White House, like 46 presidents or something.
He is 90 years old.
Yeah.
Actually.
And touring.
It's crazy. I mean, Neil Diamond is 82 years old. So, I mean, these are artists, like, you're in your 80s, your 90s, and you're still kicking out an album. Like, come on.
Still making an album, man. And you're still doing it the way you did it 40 years ago.
Crazy.
I think the last podcast when we talked about what I was listening, it was the Daft Punk Random Access Memories album, but it was the one without drums on it. And I have an appreciation for that music. I think that what Daft Punk did with that, in particular that album, it will go up with the Beatles' White Album and the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds as probably the best. Thriller's up there. Obviously, you're talking about top 5, but Random Access Memories will go down in history as being one of the greatest ever. And having said that, the way they did it was not the way Neil Young did it. They had access to the greatest musicians on earth, greatest production on earth. Willie Nelson and Neil Young grabbed a guitar. That was it.
Yeah, and then just produced music.
And they just made music. And that's not really the way it tends to work anymore. And so we still have a few of these folks around that we can still listen to and be like,
so crazy.
wow, I can still hear that troubadour. You know, that was the term troubadour music, right? And Willie Nelson's still doing that. He was the original outlaw country guy. He invented it. So yeah, the Neil Youngs, the Willie Nelsons, love them while you can, guys. If you get a chance to see them in person, my gosh, for the love, go to a show.
I bet that's
go. You gotta go. Yeah. You see Neil Young and any band that he brings, especially his Crazy Horse guys.
Oh man.
So yeah, that's what I'm listening to. You got me geeked out. See what you did there?
No, it's fantastic. I love hearing, because honestly, a lot of times you'll suggest music to me that I wouldn't ever find, because I'm just typically what's in my memory or what I hear on mainstream is what I'm grabbing.
Yeah.
Not necessarily any random, So some of the albums that you've suggested stuff, I'll go back and I'll listen and be like, hell yeah, like that's pretty legit. So yeah, no.
Yeah. I'll send you the playlist. There was an album in 2023. There were a couple that surprised me. Co-Defendants was an act. They're musicians. One of the guys went to prison. This is his post-prison album. Fantastic. And then there was an act called CEO at Business.net that was probably my biggest surprise of the year. I included that on one of the playlists because I was like, how can I not include CEO at Business.net? Right? Like,
great.
Just the name alone means I include them. And then I listened to the album and was like, holy crap, that is fantastic. There's always a Run the Jewels, right? Every year they do it. But what I found, and I'll be honest with you about my 2023 like favorite albums, I went through and listened. I was light on a couple of genres, in particular hip hop and rap. I was light there. And some of the heavier metal stuff, so some of the core metal stuff, I didn't have a lot of stuff there. And it's not because I didn't listen to it. And I think that's what's interesting when I talk to people about these playlists. It's not because I didn't listen to them, but a lot of times I find hip hop and rap pretty objectionable, right? I think there's some things that get said in those songs that I'm just honestly I'm not aligned with. And so I end up being pretty light on that genre. And then the same thing is going for some of the really darker metal bands lately. Some of the stuff I get why people get into it. I know it's like joking. I know it's said in jest and something, but some of that stuff is really a lot.
And it's drilled into you too during those songs for sure.
It really is, and you have to decide. Music's an art form. People should be able to say whatever they want to say. But when you go through and you listen to a year's worth of music, it is really interesting to see. The reason I listen to albums, I think I've told you about this before. I don't listen to singles for a reason. So the reason I listen to albums is because anybody can make a song. It is really, really exceptionally hard to make a good album. Right. There's a lot of one-hit wonders out there, and they fill up our radio stations, and there's one-hit wonders. It is a different thing to put 12 songs on an album. And if you listen to an album, you can hear where the artist is in their life. And if you have a favorite artist and you listen to album, you can hear the changes, right? You can, the Eagles. The Eagles. You go listen to some of these albums, they hated each other by that last album, and you can hear it. And so to me, when you go and do that and you compile that, the music that we are consuming actually has a statement as well. And I will say that, I believe that we as a society are in a mental health crisis, and I think the music represents that. You go back and listen to the 2023 my favorites. So, but check out Neil Young, check out some of the Willie Nelson albums, Lucas Nelson, right? Some great stuff. There was St. Paul and the Broken Bones, had one of my favorite albums last year. Jason Isbell. Obviously, if you're not listening to Jason Isbell, you are wrong. So yeah, some good stuff, man. But check out that Neil Young album.
Almost 800 songs, folks. I mean, come on, that's a hell of a playlist right there. So
I needed 776.
One more song.
I go by 7. I needed one more.
One more.
One more. Somebody on the editing room floor on one of those albums left a song out that they should have included.
Yeah, well, you'll find out this year probably.
yeah. So Hapa, what you playing, man? What games are you playing, Hapa?
They're no difference from last week. I'm playing a lot of War Thunder. I'm playing a lot of World of Warship still, of course.
And you support them getting it right, sure.
I was excited for Grand Theft Auto 6 until I read an article. The CEO of Rockstar Games is saying that, in his opinion, games should cost almost double what they cost right now. And
the CEO of Rockstar makers
Yes.
of Grand Theft Auto,
Yep.
Red Dead Redemption, some of the
Yep.
bigger names, has
Yep.
said what now?
That in his opinion, the $60 price tag or $70 price tag that
Yeah, the
we
AAA
currently
price
have,
tag, right? Yeah.
he's like it should be doubled to
To
keep
$150?
up with to keep up with the price. If you read on an article, it makes sense. Now it makes sense what he's saying. The
Yeah.
budget to create AAA titles like these games has
Yep.
steadily increased while the prices remain the same, right?
Yeah.
So it is estimated, case in point, that Grand Theft Auto 6's budget for producing Grand Theft Auto 6 is close to $2 billion.
Wow.
Which is 4 times what it costs to do Grand Theft Auto 5. So when you put it in that aspect, I definitely can understand where he's coming from, but I don't know that I would be willing to pay $150 for a video game.
And I get where he's coming from too, right? Business expenses have increased. Except you're a big studio now and you suck.
Yes, and that was the counter argument from the person writing the article, was that games have been exceedingly getting worse also over time.
Right. You guys are doing Grand Theft Auto 6.
Yes. Your
I'm
sixth
sorry.
title, by the way.
I'm sorry you have so little creativity that you're doing the 6th
the same
version of a game.
Yes.
And in 6 iterations, your stupid ass hasn't figured out how to make it cheaply.
Yeah. Yeah.
That ain't on me. I'm sorry, kid. I ain't paying you $150 for that shit. It ain't happening. When
I mean, it would have to
when
be
you got
an
indie games,
incredible game for me to.
Dude, we spent. Now here's the thing. I'll spend $500 on a game. I just won't spend $500 to get the first chance to play it.
Yes, sure. I could agree with that.
And when you've got indie games, so 2023, right? We in review.
Oh, Battle Bit.
Dude, the indie
$12
games.
bucks.
How many indie games did we just got done playing? Doing Lethal Company.
Yeah.
Right, like. These indie games are kicking your ass. Baldur's Gate 3 put everybody on notice.
That was one thing that they had mentioned in the article I read. I guess I should have probably had that in our conversations, but they had mentioned specifically that Baldur's Gate has essentially, in 2023, set the standard for the quality that you should be looking for, along with the price tag, and let me say it again, no microtransactions.
No microtransactions.
You got a game, that's fully flushed out. And as far as I can tell, you haven't even beat it yet, right? Like,
no, I'm very close to the end, and I've been a little bit completionist. But you can play that game for 100 hours and not finish it the first time, and it's replayable.
And I've seen that
infinitely
reiterated in a
replayable.
couple articles that they were talking about. Baldur's Gate specifically has set this. They really have set a standard that I don't think any other AAA studio wants to admit to. Like,
100%. 100%. You got your boy at Rockstar coming out and saying we should charge more for games, and you got every player saying you should do better at making games. So here's what I tell you. Here's what's going to happen to Grand Theft Auto 6. You want a patented 7 prediction?
It's a hot take right here.
Same thing that happened to Diablo 4. Nobody gives a shit.
Oh yeah. Yep.
You know why? Because your last game was actually better, and you got high on your own supply.
Yep.
Just like Cyberpunk 2077 did. You got high on your own supply, and thought, I have to do it so big, and you actually didn't. A guy made a bunch of Lego figures shoot each other. Yeah. No. You're gonna have to play within the rules of the bound. Now, here's the interesting thing: the free-to-play games, which you and I play a lot of. We play a lot of free-to-play games. I promise you, I will spend 150, 200, 300. Money is not my biggest limitation in life.
Yeah.
I will spend money on my entertainment. So if you're telling me it needs to cost $300, I'm telling you no. But I will spend $300 on a game, just not your game.
And I think that's where the crux of that article was talking about, was they were trying to figure out ways to get more money without doing microtransactions, because they know that gamers are done with microtransactions. So one of the things they talked about was charging for how long you play, which I think is freaking crazy. Like, I think you're hurting the developers at that point, because your developers, if they put their hearts into a product and produce a quality product that people want to play, and now you're charging them to play per hour or whatever, like, come on, man. Like,
What happened to people just the $15 a month subscription was a really solid price point for me, right? Like EVE Online, World of Warcraft. There were plenty of games where I paid $15 a month, And in the case of some of those, I would buy, I would pay for the game, $60, whatever.
And then on top of it.
And then on top of it, I pay the $15 a month. I'm actually okay with that. I would even buy other stuff.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so there's ways to make money out there which are not skeezy. And
I don't know.
I don't think it's as difficult as some of these AAA studios are making it out to be. I think that you just need to make a better product. I'm
curious to see how this year's going to pan out for that, because
I think the AAA studios are in trouble. I think that the 17th revision on an existing engine, on an existing gameplay style, it's just getting old and played out. And people like, Larian Studios with Baldur's Gate 3, BattleBit, remastered.
They just want to produce a quality product, man. They
just want to do something fun, man. Stardew Valley was a dude. Concerned Ape made it by himself at a table.
Yeah.
And, would he love to make more money? Sure, but the guy's set. He did a good job. He made a great thing. Right. He made a piece of art. He made something that people love. Yeah. And that's what video games, you and I have talked. I get passionate about this because as much as I love music, I believe that video games are the highest art form. And,
for sure.
So that to me, anyone who's commercializing an art form has to be really careful with how they do it, right? Because you can ruin the art form in the process. That's Neil Young's whole argument, right?
Well, and I think that's what's happened, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, that's what AAA studios are literally doing.
Yep, Blizzard and Bethesda and all of you are. I'm looking at you. I mean, I'm seeing. I don't know. There's a lot
eyes on you.
There's a lot of games coming out, man. You've got Space Marine 2 coming out. You got Grand Theft Auto 6 coming out. They just announced a new Fallout title. I think Fallout London, I think, is the new one. There's a lot of stuff coming in the oncoming year that I'm looking forward to. But the conversation brought up by the Rockstar CEO really made me nervous, because I'm like, well, I hate to tell you, buddy, gaming is my hobby, but I do have limits to how much I'll spend for that hobby. Not gonna lie.
On print, and you know what's interesting happened, and I know you well enough to say that I think I speak for both of us when we talk about not spending $300 at launch. It's on principle.
Yeah.
It's not that it's not that I can't spend $300 on your game. It's on principle.
Yeah.
You know what? I might spend the $300 a year after you launch, and I'm sure that your game works and is fun, and I've got 5 friends who are still playing it, because there's all these things that have to go right for us to fall in love with the game.
Yeah.
Right? And it's not graphics. Right? It's not some of these things
gaming?
New World?
New World is a perfect example of that.
I
spent money on that game, and I honestly feel like I wasted
you were
my money.
You were into that game for a minute.
Oh yeah, for a hot minute. But the bugs and issues, the microtransactions just kept compiling to the point where I was like, I really regretted buying that game. Like, I legitimately regretted it. And and that's where we're at nowadays with a lot of AAA titles. Like Rita and I talk about Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is coming out soon.
Yep.
We played
Ubisoft,
the beta.
Right?
It was awesome. I had a blast. It's like a combination of Assassin's Creed, but you're also like on a pirate ship shooting at each other's ships. Like, it looks like it's promising. It was really a hard sell for me to pre-order it, because I don't like pre-ordering anymore. But Rita was interested in playing the game, and it's hard for us to find a game that we want to play together. So it's like, you know what, we'll spend some money there. So I don't know.
Things have got to go. They got to go a certain way when you can pay that kind of money for a game. And AAA titles, it's funny because AAA titles at $70, the AAA companies are the ones not delivering at a AAA level. What do you consider, right? These studios, right? They say, a AAA title is what? What makes you a AAA title?
Yeah.
What have you done, Cyberpunk 2077, full of bugs? What made that AAA in your mind? Oh, it had great graphics. Man, screw you.
You finally patched it a year later, got to work. Like, what?
Look, I love Cyberpunk 2077. That game worked for me like at release, and I will be honest, that's one of the best games I've ever played. But it didn't work for anyone else.
It didn't work for me at all.
Right. And that's not AAA, man. You're going to be AAA, be AAA. Now, I will say, if AAA titles came out and they were Baldur's Gate 3, right, they were as promised or they exceeded expectations, I promise you people will pay $150 for the collector's edition.
That was a win.
Yep.
I haven't heard a single bad thing from any of my friends that have Baldur's Gate.
There's nothing bad to say.
Yeah,
nothing bad to say.
I haven't heard a single bad thing other than they lose track of time.
You into that. Oh, I will, dude. You blink and it's 9 hours later, and you're like, what?
Like, where did it go? I don't know. Like, what happened?
That's a AAA. To me, that's a AAA. The immersiveness,
for sure.
Getting lost in a game. I love it when I find a game to get lost in. So yeah. All right. Well, I think that was the best conversation we've ever had around what you're playing. We don't make a lot of effort around talking about games on our podcast, but that was kind of fun. We can do that more often.
Maybe we need to actually have an episode where we just focus on that.
I think so. I think we should. I think it'd be fun. Anyway. All right, Hapa. So let's wrap up. We got about 3 minutes left. Talk about Hapa's rules, man. Give us a little introduction for the new year. What is this? What is it? Where did it come from? Tell us about it.
Yeah. So to hear the first 50 rules, you guys are gonna have to go back a few episodes because it's at the
Are we
end
at
of
50?
every.
Are we at 50?
We're at 51 right now. Is the
51? Okay.
Start off. So
right.
I've got some rules that I've over the years going through life that I've just written down, and they're like my rules for living. And we're at 51 right now, and they're pretty straightforward. I've found that these are rules that if you try to live by them, 9 times out of 10 you're going to be pretty successful in your endeavors throughout your day. 51 is success is not the things you are surrounded with. Success is the lives you touch. And that's one that when I was a leader in the Navy was huge. I always used to say, I don't miss a place, I miss the people. Always. Whenever I left a place, it was never the place, it was always the people that I missed. Live the best life you can and understand that not everyone is going to be respectful to that life. I mean, not everyone's there to be with you throughout that ride, right? Don't worry about not knowing what you want to do in life. This one's a huge one for a lot of the folks that I've mentored throughout my life. Do not worry about knowing what you want to do in your life or where you want to go. 99.9% of us don't know either. And I feel like even now, today, I'm still like, what am I going to do tomorrow? I have no idea, right? So 54, respect your elders. That's always been one for me. You know, like if someone's been around a little bit longer than me, I tend to give them a little bit more respect. That doesn't mean that you have to like bow down to them, but it also doesn't mean you need to, not be respectful to the fact that they've been around a little longer than you, right? Confidence is attractive. Arrogance is ugly. The opposite of love is disgust. Have the difficult discussions no matter how painful it may seem. Like that one's a hard one probably for a lot of people to stomach because it's easier to avoid, right? Your race, your color, your creed, your sexual orientation, your religion, it's yours. No one can take them away from you, and it doesn't make someone else's invalid. Nor do you need to advertise it, by the way. 59 is rejection occurs. Move past it. 60 is, I love this one, social media. It's not particularly social. Kind of ironic, isn't it?
Yes. I like that one.
My rules.
You know my thoughts on social media.
Hell yeah.
Well, those are good. Those are good, man. Enjoyed it. Well, this was a good podcast. Hapa had fun. We hit it almost dead on at 9 o'clock. So Here we are. Yeah. So I'll do the talking away here. So you can find our podcast anywhere you get podcasts. That's Spotify, Apple, wherever you get them. You can find our podcasts. Again, we do broadcast them live on YouTube. So if you want to get them a couple of days before everybody else, feel free to hop on our channel. We had some folks hanging out today. It was nice to see everyone chatting. So thank you to Rita, Abyss, our Owens, right? Thank you to Hector, all y'all. Thank y'all all for stopping by, hanging out in chat. Appreciate you. Everyone who's listening all over the world. We do have people all over the world. We appreciate you. We are thankful that you're willing to spend a couple of hours with us on occasion. We hope that you're getting a little bit of happiness out of it, and that makes your world a little bit better. So where do we want to find you, Hapa, if we want to find you outside of this podcast? How can people find Hapa Fodder on the internet?
If you literally Google Hapa_fodder 9 times out of 10, I would say 99.9% of the time it's going to be me. My little icon, my either that's the social media apps or YouTube or Twitch, whatever the case may be, it's probably me. And that's the easiest way to find me. Just Google Hapa_fodder and I'm there.
Same thing goes for me, S3VYN. You look that up. There is one other person on one other site that got it one time. And if you find them, tell them I said hello. And then I want my name back. So, but otherwise, you can find me on Twitch, Twitter, X, whatever Elon names it next week, right? You can find me all over those places. and I'll be around. Catch us both on Twitch. We are on Twitch quite a bit. I would say the most routine place if you want to catch us for content is Twitch. We hang out together on Twitch. We hang out with our friend Deacon. We hang out with Rita. We've got a great group of friends. That's something in 2023 I'm very thankful for, Hapa, is that there's a crew that we've kind of assembled over the last year or so that honestly, is kind of a nice crew to just get to hang out with and be centered with and play games with. And we do that on Twitch a lot of times. So if you want to catch us, come chill at Twitch, and you get to hear a lot more insanity than we kind of let on in the podcast. Yeah, it's definitely shenaniganizing. So cool. So we plan to be back 2 weeks from tonight. No, a week from next Tuesday is when we plan to be back. So that would put, I'm going to give it a date. I'm going to try to give it a date. Let's do that. We don't ever do that. So that would be the 16th.
On stream and cover part of your videos.
Oh no. So that would be the 16th. We're looking at January the 16th as our next podcast. Make plans to be with us, make plans to hang out.
Please do.
If you have subjects that you want to hear, send them our way. One of the things we are putting out a request for is if you have historical events that you thought were pretty interesting, send them our way. We're going to compile a few of those into a podcast to talk about events in history. So send those our way. So beyond that, Hapa, I'll leave it to you to tell everyone good night.
As always, hope you guys take care of yourselves, take care of each other, laugh, smile, make someone else laugh and smile. Just be a better human out there. And we hope to see you, or maybe not necessarily. I hope you see us. That's it. Or hear us in a couple weeks. And hopefully you guys have a great weekend, great rest of your week. Night, everybody.
Bye, everybody.